I'm doing this video because over the course of many years, people have asked me what the difference is between American Indian and Native American. So hopefully in a few minutes I can break it down for you all. So by now, if you've learned anything about history, you should know that Christopher Columbus came over here on a voyage with African Moors aboard his ship, looking for the people of God, looking for Jerusalem, looking for the old world in the Bible. We know that all the land masses were connected at one point, and they got separated by water. Case in point, Atlantis, pyramids under the sea. Those pyramids at one point were above water. But anyway, Columbus brought over a Hebrew interpreter to speak to the true Israelites, American Indians, lost tribes of Israel. And he called these Hebrew-speaking indigenous people Indios. The Indi part, the beginning of that word, is the origin of indigo, which is the darkest color in the color spectrum, which is blue-black. The root Indi also means, it's the root of the word indigenous, meaning the first inhabitants of a said place. The Dios part means of God. So indigenous people of God. That's what Columbus called us American Indians when he landed here. Now, we're going to skip all the way to the ending of American Indian slavery. Not transatlantic slavery, because that's something different. There was less than 200,000 African slaves brought over to these Americas, and they were mostly brought to the Caribbean and the east side of America. So we're not talking about the transatlantic slave trade. There were more than 5 million American Indians enslaved, the ones who really had their land stolen, the ones who really were raped, whose children were stolen and kidnapped, who were forced to pick cotton, cut sugar cane. Those slaves were American Indians. This is why Abraham Lincoln offered the American Indians 40 acres and a mill, not Africans, because they were offering Africans the option to go back to Africa. Do you see the difference? African American is different than American Indian. Hence Liberia and places, other free towns that were set up in Africa for Africans that were kidnapped, that were freed from African slavery and allowed to go back to Africa. Those are African Americans. Some of those African Americans stayed. Some of them mixed with the Indians. Some of them may think that they're Indians, but upon my research, talking to many American Indian chiefs, it's not so much what you look like, and there are tribal markers. Some people say straight Indian nose, cheekbones, texture of hair, but it's more so the spirit. This is what the chiefs say, the Indian spirit. If a foreigner were to rape one of the Indian squaws while she's out gathering fruit, nuts, resources, and she gets pregnant and she some kind of way makes it back to her tribe, and that child comes out looking just like the Indians but acting like a foreigner, then that causes a problem for American Indians. So according to the American Indian chiefs I've spoken to, it's not so much of how you look, or what language you speak or where you were born. It's more so the Indian spirit. The Indian spirit. This is how we know the difference between us and others. The Indian spirit. Some things we Indians don't do, yet others do. So Abraham Lincoln was not offering African Americans 40 acres and a mule. He was not offering Native Americans 40 acres and a mule. So here comes the term $5 Indians. Dan Calloway has done a video on the term $5 Indians. The reparations that were supposed to be given to American Indians were given to white people, Asians, and the Native Americans you see today that paid to get on the Dawes rolls and get on these rolls and be listed as an American Indian, when in fact they were Asian or European or some other foreigner. Most Native Americans have 0% Indian blood in them. Growing up, dancing at the different powwows and talking to a lot of the chiefs, and some of the Native Americans will come to a lot of these gatherings, and you would hear Native Americans say that they are not Indians. So what's the difference? American Indians are indigenous. Native Americans are foreigners that came over from Europe or Asia or some other foreign place and have, whether they lied and paid $5 to get listed as an American Indian or listed as a Native American, or whether they have adopted some form of American Indian customs, that does still not make them an indigenous American Indian. So here's how you can find out the difference. Pictures say 1,000 words. I have on my Instagram, I've posted pictures of indigenous American Indians. If you go to Sexy Dancer, I'm a tribal dancer, on Instagram, you will see pictures of indigenous Chata, indigenous Tainos, indigenous Aztecs, indigenous Senecas. I have pictures of what real American Indians look like. People always ask, well, why don't American Indians and Native Americans look anything alike? Why don't the Native Americans look like the ancestors? Because they are not the same people. So there was this lady, I forgot her name. She was supposedly a Native American Ojibwe, and she was going toe-to-toe, having a Twitter war with brown-skinned, copper-colored American Indian. And so I let the Ojibwe lady, Native American lady, know that I have some pictures of the indigenous Ojibways, and she didn't look anything like the indigenous Ojibways. I sent her a picture, and I said, you're battling a copper-colored American Indian that looks like the ancestors that you look nothing like. So, like I said, picture says 1,000 words, but more so than the pictures, it's the Indian spirit.